We are a conversation around the table, sharing what God has been teaching us and what we've been learning.
In every heart, there's a song, a story, a melody waiting to be written, a play ready to unfold.
A hope rising up, a longing fulfilled, a fear ready to be squashed, a prayer forming, a challenge accepted.
We are the Tea of Life podcast, telling each adventure of life, and we want to offer you an inspiration of hope as you journey through cultivating your passions.
We are excited that you are joining us today to share God's love and passion for our everyday lives. This is April.
And this is Tiffany, and you are now listening to the Tea of Life podcast.
Dr. Shannon Irvine is an entrepreneur and high-performance achievement mentor. She's the host of the Epic Success podcast. She is also the founder of Mosaic Vision, a nonprofit organization that restores the lives of AIDS orphans in Uganda. And she is also a doctor of neuropsychology. She's a wife and a mom. Woohoo! So that's really exciting. Her mission is to help others go for their God-given dreams by giving them the step-by-step blueprint to go from dream to launch in a way that honors God, family, and values. Please welcome to the show, Dr. Shannon Irvine. Woohoo!
Good morning.
Good morning, Dr. Shannon.
Oh, awesome. I'm excited for this morning's interview.
Oh, me too. And I know that you have a busy day, so we're just going to jump right in. But on this show, we love to hear how people are operating and cultivating their passions and talents. It's evident that you have a passion for giving back to others by helping them walk out their personal and business goals. So will you share a bit of what fueled your passion for helping others start their own epic life?
Yeah, out of struggle, which is usually, where the good stuff is born. I've always been a pretty driven person. That's the personality that God gave me, for whatever, for good and for bad, of course. There's both sides of that coin.
Yes.
But what I did find was when I had my kids, it's all fine until you get married and have kids because you're self-centered, right? And you're all about yourself. And so you can produce goals and do whatever you want. And there's no pushback. But, I know the order that God has designed things, and in our marriages and our children come first. They're our Jerusalem. So as I had my son, I was still trying to do things the same way as I was doing them before. And I was running up against a brick wall, and I was stressed and burnt out, and it just wasn't working the way it worked before. And I kind of had to struggle with figuring out, okay, well, I honestly, I'll tell you both. I had one of those moments where I just lost it. I melted down. I was in a puddle on my bed, just crying my eyes out, saying Lord, do you want me to give up this vision you gave me? I can't imagine you would put a dream in my heart and then ask me to sacrifice it. And then, of course, all kinds of scriptures come to your mind, like Abraham. But, I really felt like the Lord told me to just follow his lead. And as I started really pouring through scriptures and seeing that, first of all, the Lord has an order. And second of all, the Lord is the one that shows us how to make goals and how to achieve things in balance and keeping things in order. And I really started becoming just obsessed with success, but not from the standpoint of maybe the world, but more of a standpoint of okay, if I'm going to feel successful, what is that going to look like?
Right.
Because it doesn't look so good as I'm on the bed crying my eyes out. This isn't working, And I didn't want to end up being one of those kind of moms that were half present.
Right.
I wanted them to know it was God first, then my husband, then them, and then my businesses. But I still wanted to be able to crush it in my business because that's my natural being. That's
Right.
the way I like to be. So I just became obsessed with, okay, who out there is doing it well, not just making money, because that's, as we know, is not the goal.
Right.
It's great if it comes along the way, but it isn't the primary goal. For me personally, success was me that my husband would say I was a good wife, that the Lord would feel honored, that my children would know that they were my number one priority, and yet still my businesses would be thriving, one of which is my nonprofit. And then I was mentoring other entrepreneurs as I was learning how and figuring out how to do it. So that's where the obsession, to answer your question, came from, is all of that struggle. It was a few years of trying to figure it out and making mistakes and tweaking it a little bit and seeing what other people were doing and getting mentorship and uh, studying under people who had it, the kind of success that I wanted. I didn't want the hustle till your eyes bleed success. That wasn't attractive to me anymore. I wanted to be present and whole and peaceful, and at the same time really, really, really achieving the goals that I'd set out. So as I started to figure it out and develop these systems and develop this processes, that I started sharing it with people and would see them get success in that way. And it became just so exciting to me to see people freed up from that bondage of stress success and sacrificing all the people in their lives along the way and being miserable. So that's where the passion came from. And I think that's always been a desire of mine, is just to really be able to give back in some way. And so I get to do that doubly with the nonprofit and also with Epic Success. So it's a lot of fun to be able to serve others like that.
I was thinking of the verse, how God,
Mm.
in a man's heart, he plans his course, but the Lord determines his steps. And
Yeah.
it's like when you start to go somewhere, you've got, like you said, you have these talents and dreams that God gave you. And then to be like, wait a minute, do I suppress those right now? Or how do I move forward with those? And then just bringing them back to the Lord, because that's what he wants us to do, is bring them back to him and say, let me show you the order. Let me show you the season. Let me show you the steps. And so I love that.
And not to say there aren't seasons. Sometimes there are seasons. When your babies are like 2 months old, guess what? You're in a season.
Right.
And it's not about you or your business. It's about survival.
Right.
But you grow from that season to another season, and if the Lord put the desire in your heart. See, I think that scripture gets a little, the Lord will give you the desires of your heart. Well, you can take that two ways, right? Either the Lord gives you everything you want, the Ferrari, all that stuff, which probably isn't the accurate way to look at it. Although the Lord wants to give you good things, is absolutely true. But if the Lord puts that desire in your heart, then he's going to make a way for that to happen. But it's got to be, like you said, let him direct those steps and be comfortable in being guided that way.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And our God is a God of order. And we see that all throughout the Bible, to where he is not a God of chaos. He is a God of order.
Right. And when you don't have peace about something, maybe it's not that time or that season, or just bring it back for the Lord. So I love that. But I wanted to share with our listeners about things that really stuck out at me with your One Thing interview with Jeff Woods. There, you were talking about habits and how. So the next topic, or the topic I want to talk about, is how to set yourself up for success towards positive habits. And you talked about 21 days, how people think 21 days is where that's a habit. But you talk about what the brain does at that 21-day mark. Can you go into that?
Sure, I'd love to. So I call it the 21-day myth. And first of all, the way our brains are wired is absolutely stunning. So when I had the privilege of being able to study that in my postgraduate work, and it blows your mind in terms of the authority of God and just how our brains are wired and how they're designed to be extremely efficient. And that's good news, and that's also bad news because they can be very efficient at good things if that's what you're feeding it, and it can be very efficient at keeping the bad things going if that's what you're feeding it as well. So the good thing is your brain it's neutral, and you can picture, I don't know where all your listeners live, but if you've ever been out to Los Angeles with all the freeways and overpasses, and that's kind of how our brains are wired. There are these neural pathways and neural networks that over time and repeating a habit, it becomes an automatic process. And, if you think about things like when you get up and brush your teeth, you don't think about, okay, now I need to pick up the toothbrush. Now I need to, you just do it. And same thing with maybe driving the same way you've done a million times taking your kids to school. Like you don't even think, about the turns anymore. And that's just a physical example of the beauty of our brain, that it creates these systems, these pathways, these neural pathways after you've repeated a behavior over time. There's also this really cool built-in reward system called dopamine, which is a feel-good chemical that over time, it actually, so in the beginning, when you're starting a habit, it comes at the end. If you think about working out and that
Right.
workout high, so to speak, you get after the fact. Well, the fact of our brains is that dopamine response actually starts to come earlier and earlier and earlier. And when it's become an actual neural network, it actually comes before the event that you want to do. So that's why you have people who are consistently working out. They're just really jazzed by going to work out. That's because they're getting that dopamine hit before they even walk in the door. And that is powerful because our brains are set on a reward kind of system. So it's like our own internal built-in system to reward us. Well, if it's a bad habit, then your brain is rewarding that bad habit. So when we're trying to change habits, obviously we need to stop one and replace it with another. But the myth is, well, we just get to that 21 days and all is fine. Well, what's happened at that 21 days? If you picture, like, let's just use that analogy of working out versus not working out. So the behavior you want to stop is not going to work out, and the behavior you want is working out. So as you go day by day by day, and you're going to the gym, right? Each day that you go, that dopamine response comes earlier and earlier and earlier. Well, at day 21, that's the day at which your old network and your new network are equal in terms of dopamine response. And that's the tricky place, because that's the place that you hear people say it all the time. I did it for 21 days. I was doing so well, and then I just backslid. Well, that's because at that point, both freeways were equal, and your brain really was neutral at that point on which one it was going to keep going and which one it was going to kill off. So and I mean atrophy. Kill off sounds pretty dramatic. But it's good when our brains do that for us. But, so it's really that time between 21 and 67 days. And there's something about that 66, 67, 68th day in there that anticipated dopamine response is happening before the event. You've had enough time to where the neural pathway of the old bad habit has been severed. And so now you're getting your brain is fully working for your new habit. And it just really, the win in that 21 to 67 days really just depends on how long the old habit has been there. So if it's something you've been doing for 15, 20 years, it's going to take you to that 67 days. But if you think about it, like really in terms of a life change, 67 days is 2 months. It's really not that long. And it's just a matter of making that decision every single time. And if you mess up once or twice, guess what? You're already on the positive side of that 21 day. So there's no need for perfection. It's just when you do slip up and you miss a day, you just get right back at it. And telling yourself, your brain, how your brain's wired. So if you start stacking days, then that's going to become a problem. But if you miss a day and then you jump right back in, you're doing just great. So it's really a 21-day myth. And then I always say 67 days for the win, because even like the deeply ingrained habits can truly be shifted in that amount of time.
Right. I was thinking about the dopamine and how, when you say don't give up, or even if let's say you fall off the wagon, your mind would be health, and I'm doing good, and all of a sudden I mess up. So of course the natural thing to do would be to just, I can get back up. But I'm like self-sabotager going, I messed up. Well, I might as well, and I start to expect the mess ups of myself. So that's, one of those negative self-talks that we're learning about that I need to stop. But that's what I tried to do, is just self-sabotage. I'm like, I might as well sit on the couch and watch some Netflix. And, I've already been down this road. So.
And why you're doing that, so you can take the hammer out of your own hand that you beat yourself up with. The why that you're doing that is because it's the groove is made. So the groove is there. And especially when we talk about self-sabotaging things, and this is so important in business because there are times when things are difficult and they're a struggle, and knowing that we all have wiring from when we were little, something that we've told ourselves that helped us survive then but does not help us survive as an adult. It's so interesting. We as kids, we come up with what we think as a child is working. Now, we're children, so it may or may not have worked. Who knows? But in our minds, it worked, so we've grabbed onto it. And a perfect example of that, especially for women, is we tend to think, oh well, I'm just not so good at that. And that's something we would say maybe to get attention or whatever the case may be as a child, but then we hold on to that. And then when we come up against something hard, those self-sabotaging thoughts don't come up when it's easy. It comes up when it's up against something. And then boom, the thought's just there. And that's a signal that's coming from something that served you as a child. But if you think about it, because we're moms, we understand the logic and reasoning of a child as it grows. You know how they're going to grow into maturity, and as an adult, you can look back and say, "Wait a minute, that's not going to actually serve me." Right. So when you hear those, we call them ants in our my course, automatic negative thoughts. And the way to come against those is obviously just recognizing that you're even saying it. So good on you that you're actually recognizing that it's a sabotaging thought, because that's 80% of the battle right there, is exposing it and then replacing it.
I think I was thinking about, so as in dopamine, setting myself up then for success. So when the self-sabotage thought comes, and acknowledging that, and then, keep pressing forward. But what would be a good way to have that dopamine response? I mean, so like when we were talking about the gym, and afterwards we go to the gym, it's like, the Hallelujah chorus comes down because we went to the gym. And so we get,
right?
Yay, we did it. But how can we add more dopamine responses to help us move towards our good behavior? Does that make sense?
No, absolutely it does. And again, knowing the way your brain is wired, it's vital that you set up small little rewards along the way, because what we typically do is we say something like this, like, okay, I want to go to the gym every day at 5:00 when we're not morning people. And then every single day I'm going to eat only apples. And then, you know what I mean? We make these like
ridiculous,
unrealistic goals, and then we feel horrible when we don't achieve them. Instead of course, and I teach this to my students all the time, like, you need a goal that is beyond huge, right? You need that. And then you need to break it down step by step by step by step, so that you can create small obtainable goals that you can reward. So the more you can build those mileposts in to say, okay, if I make it to the gym 3 days this week, or if I walk 3 days this week, I'm going to, whatever the thing is for you. Now, I don't want to plug in the blank there, because what rewards me might not be as exciting for you. Like sitting down and reading a book is like heaven to me.
I know.
Without the kids needing something, that's heaven to me. And not in the bathroom,
right? With the locked door, trying to go to the bathroom.
Whatever it is for you, small things that don't sabotage your goal, right? But like in business, because typically when we're going for a business goal, there are so many little intricate steps. So having predefined milestones: when I get to this point, I'm going to go do this. When I get to this point, I'm going to go, and when I've hit this kind of more major one, I'm going to go get a massage or whatever it is. But doing that ahead of time, because then you're looking forward to not just the achievement, but you're looking forward to the reward. And now you're using the power of how your brain thinks. And then those daily, one of the things that I really encourage people to do is really breaking down those goals so much that you really have only 3 things you're doing every day towards your goal. And when those 3 things have been achieved, then you just the mere fact that you call that a success is huge, because we're so designed to have a to-do list, a million miles long, and never feeling like enough is done.
Right.
So when you start stacking those couple, 2-3 things a day, that's a success. Anything else on top of that is icing on the cake. That is a built-in reward in and of itself.
Yes.
Dr. Shannon, listening to your podcast, I have learned about the goal setting checklist steps that you have. And I have to tell you that on the very first podcast that I listened to, where you gave out these goal setting steps and I wrote them down, it was like just writing down those 12 steps and not even filling in any of the information with those steps was just freeing. It was almost like I could just stand up and just take a breath at that moment, just because it was like things were categorized and I suddenly felt like I could just not feel so overwhelmed with everything being in one big pot.
Right.
So I'd like to touch a little bit on these goal setting steps that you have. We don't have to talk about all of them in full because you do that on your podcast, but if we could just talk about just maybe what the steps are and go through those.
Sure. And I love that what you said, Tiffany, because that's what happens when we start feeling the overwhelm and the burnout and all of those things, is because first of all, we're keeping it all in our head, and we do a lot of I should be doing, fill in the blank. Again, with our feminine DNA, for your male listeners, it's a little bit different for us because we don't have a network that can put things in boxes. It's not how we were designed on purpose. We were designed differently. And some days that's a real big blessing, and some days it makes us want to hit our heads against the wall just to make it quieter.
Right. I tend to shut down. Like whenever I have all this stuff to do and I can't categorize it, I completely shut down, and I'm just like, okay, I'm going to.
Absolutely. And that's where that overwhelm comes from.
Right.
And first of all, God didn't design it that way. He didn't give us all that giftedness. And it's really, this is the geek part of me. It's really cool when you see it in the PET imaging scans, because you literally can see the corpus callosum, the part down the center that relates back and forth between the sections of our brains. In men, it is extremely small, and there's not a whole lot of crossing going on. And that's why men can hyper focus to the detriment of like the fire in the house and the whatever going on.
Okay.
They're wired that way for purpose, and God doesn't make any mistakes, and it's beautiful, as we're two as one kind of thing. Where if you look at our brains, there's just all kinds of pathways going back and forth. Every area is connected.
And I feel that sometimes, most of the time.
Right. And
I feel my head jerking back and forth.
Yeah, right. And
Volley.
Down at night, we can't just go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm asleep. Like they can.
Yes,
exactly.
I know. I'm like, how are you in the bed already?
I don't know if there's a wife out there that hasn't like wanted to grab a dart and just be like, how can you do that?
Exactly.
So part of the goal setting is really, I love the words you used. It's a system. It's a step by step. It's not some crazy woo woo thing out there, which a lot of experts try to make it, like this big mystical, say it and it will come, name it and claim it kind of stuff. It's like, ugh, I got enough up in my head that I want to name and claim, and so they're all fighting with each other. So, the first big step in my goal setting system is to really identify where you've been in the past. So identifying, just really thinking through, okay, what goals do I have right now before I even enter into this system? We call it our pregame. What has worked and what hasn't worked, and understanding that about yourself and literally physically writing it out. It actually gets out of your head and starts to get into a part of your brain that has to work with multiple systems once you start writing it down. And then, we really break down each goal through a process of rating it and ranking it. And it's a little bit challenging on the podcast to kind of show that, but yet you can link to that goal setting checklist for your listeners. But taking each area of our life, there's like 12 main categories that I break it down into, from, your business, what I call your superpower, the thing that you were wired and designed to do. Sometimes that corresponds with business, right? And they overlap, but sometimes it doesn't. And so that's why I like to keep that separate. And to your marriage and or important relationships in your family, to your children, all the way down to your environment, because that affects all 12 areas affect what you feel is successful. So what we feel like when we feel like we're looking for work-life balance, which I think is another myth. We have work-life integration. All 12 of those areas are integrated. And so you could be crushing it in your business, but if your family life or if your environment is off, then you're not going to feel successful. I mean, maybe you will for like the hour, and then you get home and you're like, oh, I don't feel so successful anymore. And that's because they all work together. They all feed each other. And so they're, to just make a goal in one area and not in all 12, that doesn't mean you'll be working on all 12 at the exact same time, because that's not possible. But even the act of sitting down and writing down a goal in each of those 12 areas allows your brain the freedom to say, yeah, that's what I want for that. I really want this for this area of my life. And the beautiful thing is the way our brains are designed is, even though that might not be what we call our epic audacious goal at the moment, because you've gone through the exercise of even writing it down and defining it, your brain starts to kind of work toward that. You're aware of it. You're seeing it more. And therefore, some movement in that is happening because of that. So, we take each of these 12 areas, we write a goal out for each of them, and then we rate them based on where we are currently. So like, say in my health area, since we've talked about that earlier, say it's 5 right now. That's where I think it is. It's on a 1 to 10 scale, it's about a 5. And then we rank them. Where do I want to be? I want to be I'd like to, of course, us overachievers, there's like, we want to be at 10s in every area, but I encourage you to be realistic, So say I want to go from a 5 to an 8 in the next few months. So the difference, or the gap, is 3. You can do that for every area, and quickly you'll be able to see in that gap area which ones have the biggest gap. So say in one area it's horrible and I'm at a 1 or a 2 and I want to be at an 8. That would be a 6. That one would really that gap would really stand out to me. And that area is probably the area that is the most neglected. And that, even though it might not be the goal that you're really, really working on, without honoring that particular area of your life, success is always going to be beyond your reach. We call that our epic value. And it's the piece that, once we're aware of that, then we can weave that into all of our goal setting in a way that honors it and builds it up, so that it becomes better and better and better every single day. And you feel more congruent, you feel more whole, you don't feel out of balance, even though you might be working really hard in one area and other areas are having to take some slack. And that's truth. That's the reality, that you cannot balance all things at all times. But if all 12 areas of your life, you've got them defined and you're communicating with your significant others in those places, then it becomes okay. And you don't feel that stress and that overwhelm anymore, because you've defined it and you know what you're working toward, and you're kind of honoring that thing that has the biggest deficit and gap, and trying to be purposeful about paying attention to it in your goal setting. So it's definitely a system, and it is a step. I love step by step. Just hold my hand and tell me what to do.
Yes.
Kind of my thing,
Yes.
And so that's the nutshell of the goal setting system that I've used to launch our nonprofit, that I've used to launch my podcast. I mean, it's a system, as you kind of get into the details of it, that really gives you a daily step-by-step plan.
I really enjoy going through the steps, just talking to myself about the goals, even just putting that on my radar, that it's okay to dream. It's okay to set those goals, and learning about that is so freeing.
I love that you said that, because one of the things, and I talk to a broad audience. Some are people that share my faith as a Christian, and some are not. They all come from different backgrounds. But one of the things that my Christian brothers and sisters, I see a lot in that there's this misconception. It's not truth. It's a misconception about what God thinks and feels about setting goals and achievement. There's a lot of people that feel like it's in opposition to what God's telling us to do. And the scriptures disagree with that. I mean, God himself sets goals. Jesus himself set goals. Tomorrow, I think I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do this. The difference is God just wants us to, as we are doing that, first of all, he wants us to bring that stuff to him and say, is this what you want? Right. And then as you're walking those goals out, he tells us just to do everything we do as honoring him.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So he just wants to be honored in our day. He just wants to be a part of it. He wants to be, the advisor. He doesn't want us to be kind of spinning off on our own saying, well, I think this is the best thing, and then never ever paying attention to him. He wants it to be a partnership, but he wants us to be successful in achieving things because that just points back to him.
Exactly. And in Proverbs 29:18, it says, where there is no vision, people perish.
Right. That's right. Yeah. And so you have well-meaning, super talented people with amazing superpowers, keeping them hidden. Yeah. And I'm sure the Lord is like, oh, yeah. I gave you that so you could help. Like if your goal, if you're calling your goal, whatever you want to call it, is to help one person in your family or 1 million people out there in social media, whatever that is, that's your superpower. And without it, we're missing out on what that piece of the puzzle that we can't get without you.
The superpower, I know I've been struggling with what is my superpower in the class. And I think sometimes I'm afraid to just sit down with the Lord and ask him what it is. I think I know it, but I'm afraid of it in some weird way. I don't know. I'm afraid of myself sometimes.
Mm-hmm. But we all are. You're normal.
Okay, good. I'm so glad. Well, there is just a few more minutes left that we have with you.
Yeah, we haven't talked a whole lot about the nonprofit, but it is my passion, and what we do with Mosaic Vision, and it's mosaicvision.org. Okay. And we restore the lives of AIDS orphans in Uganda. We started with 2 kids back in 2004, and now we've helped over 650 orphans. These are kids who have lost mom and dad to AIDS. So when we go in, they are living in what's called a child-headed home. Kids who have, are 12, taking care of 2 and 3 and 4 younger siblings. They're out of school. They can't afford to do anything. They're barely surviving. And we actually hire a caregiver, usually a widow, to move into the home with them and help them go back to school and help them just restore their childhoods. Wow. But much like we would do for our own kids, we're like a deep ministry there. So we try to help them grow up to be strong, mature adults who love the Lord. And so we are always aware of, we don't just throw money at that. We really are about discipling and developing character, just like we would want for our own kids if, God forbid, we were ever taken away. Right. So that's what Mosaic Vision does. And how we do that is through one-on-one orphan sponsorship. So one person here raises their hand and says, yes, I want to help. And they sponsor one orphan, and that takes care of their education and their health care and the caregiver in the home. And it really is just a beautiful answer to God's direction, which is to take care of the orphans and widows in their distress. And so that is a passion of mine. So I would love it if your listeners went to mosaicvision.org if they'd like to hear more about that and learn more about that. And then, we have a great free masterclass coming up to dive into exactly what we've been talking about today, but even deeper. It's about an hour-long training, and we're going to be going through not just goal setting, but the mindset surrounding it that we've touched on today a little bit as well, the goal setting system, as well as some productivity powerhouse tips that can help you really put this stuff into action. So I'm thrilled to do that November 8th and November 9th. And the best way, you either link it or you could jump on to drshannonervin.com/epic success masterclass.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm going to definitely have those links in the notes. I know you have something up there on Facebook already. I'll go ahead and share that. The Mosaic Vision, I think that's where it started, right? That's not something new for you. You've been passionate about these kids.
Oh yeah. 12 years now. The nonprofit's been, we founded in 2004. So that's actually getting to be more than
Wow.
that now, huh? Yeah, 12 years. And, we're all typically multi-passionate people, right? God gives us a lot of passions. And so along the way, I've always mentored young entrepreneurs. I love seeing people step into their God-given vision, whether it be a nonprofit, whether it be a ministry, whether it be a for-profit business that's really making an impact in the world and serving other people. I love seeing people just step in to what God has wired them for before the beginning of time, because there's no better way to serve the Lord and serve others than by really understanding at the heart is achievement is really trying to serve other people. And as we peel the layers away and we achieve more and more, it really circles back to that. And the more we can serve other people with our superpower, with our gifts and our goals, the world becomes a better place to be around.
Absolutely. And that is the premise of our podcast.
Amen.
We want to be able to encourage people to seek and cultivate their passions and to be able to love their life, because there's so many people who hate their day-to-day, they hate their jobs, they just live for the weekend, or and we just want to be able to encourage people that they can actually do things that they are passionate about and love the life that they live.
Absolutely. And even if it's like, a lot of times I'll hear homeschooling moms say, I'm just a mom, I just homeschool. Oh my goodness. Like, you can't see me, but I am like,
I am a homeschooling mom.
We are homeschool moms.
It's not my superpower as much as my son would beg. And it's such a gift, and you never know. See, that's the beauty. That's where we keep our humbleness, is that we don't know the truth of the impact that we may or may not have. Our whole superpower might be designed so that we impact one person that's going to change something in this world.
Exactly.
We don't know that. We don't know. But
Mm-hmm.
we've got to put it out there, because that's what we've been given by God, and we need to honor him like that.
Right.
I am beyond thrilled that you are on the show today, and I know we're out of time, and I want to thank you again.
So much fun being on with you girls. I love your idea and your podcast and the way you're building other people up in the Lord and in their day, and kind of in a coffee chat kind of style. I just adore it, and I just hope your listeners subscribe and review and just give you lots of love, because it's a great mission.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Shannon. Have a great day.
Thank you for listening to the Tea of Life podcast. Follow us on Facebook or Instagram, and don't forget to leave us a review on iTunes and tell us about your passions. We encourage you to live the life you love and love the life you live.